Hey, welcome back to BUFORD Pusser, the other story, and today we're going to get into something that is controversial, and that is the fact that Buford himself was very controversial all of his life. You know, when you think about it, even from a very young age, in his teens, Buford started creating controversy about himself. When Buford was a teen, he claimed that while in Savannah one evening, he was attacked by a gang of boys that were wielding knives, and he got in a fight with them. They cut up his arms, but he's the only one that I know of that even tells that story. But it created controversy for him. Was it to impress his friends? Now, shortly after Buford graduated high school there in Adamsville, he joined the Marine Corps. He went to boot camp in Parris Island, and while he was there, he developed a problem with asthma. And eventually he was discharged medically. But the problem was that he created controversy when later in life he claimed to have been a Marine. Now, to qualify as being a Marine, you actually have to graduate boot camp, which he didn't. But even in the movie, they make the story that he had been in the Marine Corps for several years. And that is stolen valor. And that created controversy for Buford. Now, the next chapter in these controversies is when he returned home from the Marines. He and Billy Christopher, a friend of his, decided to go to Memphis one day. Well, on their return trip back to Adamsville, Billy lost control of the car. Don't know the reason why. But in an accident, Buford was ejected and injured his back. And he was in the hospital for several days. And then when he got home, it took him several days more to recover. But right after his recovery, one of his first trips away from home was down to the state line. Now, you have to keep in mind that Buford wasn't old enough to drink, so he had no business being down there. However, he claims he went, and while he was there, he decided to engage in a game of chance involving some dice. He said he caught the operator cheating and confronted him about it, and a fight ensued. As a result of the fight, he was beaten, cut up, having wounds that required 192 stitches to close the cuts on his face and his head. He was thrown out of the place in the rain and basically left for dead. He claimed he drove to the Phillips Humphrey Clinic in Selmer, had his wounds stitched up. However, there's no medical record of it. There's no witnesses to the fight. There's no photographs that show all these scars that he claimed he had. And you would think with Carl Pusser having been a chief of police in Adamsville, he would have made sure that an arrest or at least an investigation would have occurred into that, but there's nothing. And all this has created controversy. The next chapter in this saga is when Carl Pusser and Buford decided to sue the Christopher family for the injuries that he had previously received in that accident when Billy Christopher was driving. The suit was for $25,000. In today's economy, that would be like $250,000. Ironically, the Pussers lost that lawsuit, and that created controversy. Now, legend would have us believe that Buford started in his law enforcement career taking over as chief of police when his father, Carl, retired from that position in Adamsville. However, records show that the person that he followed as chief of police in Adamsville was actually Buford Surratt, who resigned, leaving the position vacant, and Buford stepped in. So there's always been a little bit of controversy about the misinformation that we've been given there. Legend would also have it that Buford barely defeated a dead Sheriff Dickey in the 1964 election for sheriff. However, the records showed that Dickey got only 307 votes, that his competitor was actually businessman George Weatherford, someone that almost none of us have heard anything about up until recently. The race was close, with Buford defeating Weatherford, an independent, by only about 288 votes. Now, during the election, Buford campaigned on the fact that he would clean up McNairy County and especially the state line. However, no one seems to be able to name a single state line establishment that Buford closed or shut down. They can't name any state liners that Buford sent to prison, leading a lot of people to wonder, what did Buford actually do? Now I hope you're beginning to see the pattern of lies, misinformation, and hype that is coming from the Pusser legend. Now keep in mind that the first big event that created a lot of controversy was the shooting death of Louise Hathcock. The official story says that she fired at him, he returned fire in self-defense. However, ear witnesses say that they heard Buford's .41 Magnum fire first, before they heard the single pop of Louise Hathcock's much smaller .38 caliber Smith & Wesson. The part that's concerning about that is for years we didn't know that an autopsy had been performed on her, and that it shows that Louise was shot in the back twice before she was shot in the head as she lay on the floor. And of course this has caused controversy. And to worsen things, James Opal Gray, who was on the grand jury that looked into her death, said that the district attorney never presented them with an autopsy report, something that would have shown the nature of her wounds. And that has created even more controversy. Now, the legend tells us that Buford was shot 8 times, stabbed 7 times, and run over by a car. However, when we take a serious look at all this, there seems to be controversy even here, as Buford was shot usually with a .25 caliber handgun. All those wounds were superficial. The only serious wound that he ever had was the one from the August 12th ambush, in which his chin, not his jaw, was hit. Many of us would question, in all these shootings, how could people miss or just barely wound a man the size of Buford Pusser? You would think that he would be an easy target at close range. Contrary to what the movie showed, his jaw was not blown away. It wasn't even in a cast. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. But when the accurate information comes out, it raises controversy. As far as the stabbings that he took, well, there's even controversy there, as while he was claimed to have been stabbed 7 times, he said the first time was by a hitchhiker that stabbed him twice in the chest. Now, he could never identify the hitchhiker, nor would the hitchhiker ever be located and arrested. No witnesses again. And then there was the time that he was working traffic at an accident, when he spotted what he felt like was a moonshiner hauling some of his load in a car. He went and approached the driver. Driver tried to take off, so he hopped on the hood. And he claimed, while this was happening, lady in the front seat was beating his arm with a wrench, and the driver was stabbing his arm with a knife. However, Ward Moore, the county coroner, was there, and he said it didn't happen that way. He said Buford did get on the hood of the car, but the stabbing part, Buford made up. More controversy about the number of times that Buford was shot and stabbed. Be sure and subscribe and hit that bell so that you'll get notifications of new videos when they're released. In view of all this misinformation that we've been fed for decades, I would think that people would really start looking at all the controversy that surrounded Buford, all the hype, the lies, the embellishments that went into his legend. Undoubtedly, the biggest controversy surrounds the death of his wife, Pauline Pusser. You look at that period of time, the number of people that saw or heard things that were not asked to give statements to the law enforcement community. Barbara Bivens and Shirley Smith, Dennis Hathcock, Johnny Harrison, Diane Vance, Ward Moore, Levon Plunk. All of them either saw, heard, or both a number of things during the time of the August 12th ambush that contradict a lot of things that Buford had to say. But yet the legend has it that she was killed in an ambush meant for him. Beyond that, you have the death of Russ Hamilton. Now, honestly, I feel like Russ was a man that probably needed killing. He had murdered several people, spent several years in prison, but somehow always getting out. Buford's claim was that he got a call, he responded to it, he went up to Hamilton's door, knocked, heard a voice that said, "Come in." He said when he started inside, Hamilton opened fire, again with a small caliber handgun. One round hit the door facing, one hit the handle of his gun, one grazed his abdomen. It was non-serious. He didn't even go to the doctor for any treatment of that one. But yet somehow Buford was able to drop to one knee, fire one shot, and hit Hamilton almost directly between the eyes. Now, like I say, I don't have a lot of sympathy for Hamilton. However, I'm not sure that the shooting happened the way that Buford said. There's just so much controversy surrounding the man. So as you hear the legend in the future, I hope you take a look at all these things. Try to decide for yourself if all or part of those could be fabrications of his story, meant to generate a legend for himself. So with that, I'll close and say as I always do, truth has no agenda. Thanks for watching.